Hi folks, and welcome to the Scare Cellar, your spot for horror, mystery, and more. My name is Emily, and today we're going to be taking a closer look at Alien. Warning, this video does contain mature content, so viewer discretion is advised. And spoiler alert, I will be talking about the film in its entirety, so if you haven't seen it yet and you don't want spoilers, turn back now, go take a watch, and then come back to hear my thoughts after you've done so. And if you're into horror, sci-fi, action movies, please do hit that subscribe button. In space, no one can hear you scream. That's right, this week I'm giving you my thoughts on Alien, so buckle up because we've got all the blood, sweat, milk, and KY jelly that you can handle. Alien is a genre-defining film for both sci-fi and horror that tells the story of a merchant vessel in space in the future that, among its travels, takes on a dangerous and mysterious passenger. While Alien is certainly a horror movie, it is also definitely a sci-fi movie. I would also classify it in some parts as an action movie, but also very strongly a thriller. So some of the sequels take on some of these other genres, but this one really is a strong intersection of sci-fi and horror. This film is the first film in what would become the Alien franchise. So it starts with Alien, then there is Aliens, Alien 3, Alien Resurrection, Prometheus, and Alien Covenant. Now Prometheus and Alien Covenant are both prequels, so those actually move further back in the timeline from Alien, which we're starting with now, but all of those films are out there and available, and I encourage you to watch them if you have an interest in this piece of sci-fi fantasy horror. The main cast members of Alien are actors who many of us know and love today for long and illustrious careers. This was towards the beginning of some of their careers. So first we have Tom Skerritt in the role of Captain Dallas, and Tom Skerritt, I personally love him from his performances in Top Gun, as well as in Steel Magnolias, which is a family favorite of mine. We have the amazing, incomparable, wonderful Sigourney Weaver playing Ellen Ripley. Sigourney Weaver has played so many amazing roles over the years. My personal favorite is Dana Barrett in the Ghostbusters series. That's just a couple of my favorite movies of all time, and I absolutely adore her. We also have John Hurt, and he is in the role of Kane. He is probably best known today by people maybe of my age group who grew up with the Harry Potter series as Ollivander, who has the wand shop. And then he is also more recently known for his work with the Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull film. He played Ox, Professor Harold Oxley. We also have Ian Holm. Ian Holm plays Ash, the science officer. He is probably best known today for his recent work in the Lord of the Rings series as Bilbo Baggins. Behind the camera on Alien is director Ridley Scott. He's known for films like Black Hawk Down, Gladiator, Thelma and Louise, Blade Runner, and so many more. His films have been nominated for over 40 Oscars and won 9, and he is definitely one of the most legendary directors of our modern era. Alien, for the most part, was written by Dan O'Bannon. Dan O'Bannon has also worked on the Star Wars original series. He worked on Alien vs. Predator, Return of the Living Dead, and kind of fun fact, I guess, not really that fun, but trivia. He actually had Crohn's disease, and that's what he ended up passing away from. But it was part of the inspiration for the chestburster in Alien. The designer whose artwork was the inspiration for the alien creature itself and who then contributed to the project as a designer is H.R. Giger. He is a Swiss designer and artist who has taken influences from a combination of Egyptian art, heavily sexual imagery, and his own kind of self-made aesthetic of biomechanical, which is a combination of mechanical and human or organic imagery married together in his artwork. One of Giger's pieces of art, Necronom 4, which was created long before the Alien series was ever dreamt up, actually became the inspiration for the alien creature. The producers and the team working on Alien saw that piece of art and thought, you know, this looks equally hostile and sexual, and it has this very disturbing sense to it, and they thought that that would make for a great movie monster. So as far as myself, I have seen Alien many times. It's definitely one of my favorite movies. I love the whole franchise. Each film has its different pros and cons and things that I love about it, whether or not it's actually good movie making. The first two in the series are definitely the strongest, and the second being my favorite, which is Aliens. But I digress. So, personal anecdote, yes, I've seen the movies many times. I love Sigourney Weaver. I'm a big fan of hers. But in Walt Disney World, they have the Great Movie Ride, and that was always my favorite portion of the Great Movie Ride. Was there's a scene where Ripley is waiting for the alien to come and possibly get her. So that's just a little personal story for me. The hype and the preconception around this movie was pretty intense. So the marketing and the graphic design work, you know, they had this very dark movie poster with just this bright green coming out of an egg. It was very interesting. It was something that people hadn't really seen before. And so it definitely caught people's attention from the pre-release promotion and marketing. And then when they did the pre-screens, when they had some of the film completed, people were fainting, they were running out of the theater to throw up. Like, people had never seen something like this before. So Ridley Scott did end up cutting back some of the gore from the film, but even then, once it hit theaters, I mean, ushers were fainting in the aisles, people were running out of the theater screaming, painting the walls of the bathrooms with vomit. I mean, it was really, really dynamic, and lines were wrapped around the block of the theater all hours of the day and night as the movie was premiering. The film was made in 1979 and is set in the future in the year 2122. So the general overview of the film is that there is a merchant space vessel, the Nostromo, and the crew and the ship are heading back from whatever their most recent job was. And en route, they pick up what sounds like a distress call from a local, well, not too close to them, but near enough to answer the call planet. And so they get instructions from the company, which if you watch the whole series, you find out that the company is actually called Weyland-Yutani, and there's a whole backstory on that, a whole lore and all of that. But long story short, the company, which on the ship, when they're speaking to the company in communications, they call it Mother, which is totally not creepy, right? So the company tells them to basically pull over and check it out. So they go to investigate, and while part of the crew is off the ship investigating this planet and looking for the source of this distress call, one of their crew members, Kane, played by John Hurt, he ends up having some kind of alien life form attach itself to his face. We call them face huggers, and they bring him back on board the ship. Science officer Ash breaks quarantine procedure and allows them back in the ship, even though Ripley ordered him not to, and she is the ranking officer when the captain and Kane are off the ship. So a little bit of a power issue there that Ash let them in, and in doing so, definitely proved Ripley's point that they could be putting the whole crew at risk. After a time, Kane seems to come around. The organism that was on his face detaches itself and dies. So, you know, he describes having a nightmare about being smothered, and, you know, they're looking at x-rays and other things in their lab as they're monitoring him and seeing that there's some kind of tube down his throat, but they don't know what the purpose of that is. So they do get the creature and put it in a glass case for study and all that, and they think everything is fine. Well, then Kane wakes up, he starts to recover, and when they're sitting at dinner, this is the famous chestburster scene, and a small alien life form busts out of Kane's stomach or torso area and runs away from the crew. So that starts them on a hunt for this, what they think is still a very small organism, and all hell breaks loose on the ship, and we start losing crew members. Now, as crew members are starting to be taken off one by one, at one point we discover that Ash, the science officer, has been given secret instructions by Mother to obtain this life form, to bring it on board the ship, and to bring it back to Earth for study. He was given this directive as a primary command, and it said all other considerations secondary, crew expendable. So, you know, Ripley discovers this later on down the road and realizes that she's in some serious trouble. All right, so the first cut of this movie is technically a burst. So at 56 minutes in, and this movie I think is about 2.5 hours, almost 3. At 56 minutes in is when the infamous chestburster scene happens. So for audiences who are seeing this for the first time, the very first drop of blood in this alien monster movie was pretty horrific. And so another fun fact that goes along with this is that Ridley Scott wanted the most organic reaction from his cast as possible. So he described to John Hurt what would be happening. John Hurt playing Kane, the person who has the chestburster come out. And the other actors knew that there would be a puppet involved and that it was going to come out of his abdomen somehow, but they didn't realize how violent and aggressive and bloody it was going to be. So a lot of the reactions of the crew in that moment are very, very genuine. And actually the actor who plays Parker, Yaphet Kotto, he went into his room and didn't speak to anybody for the rest of the day after filming this scene. Now, one fun fact I will mention is when the crew is exploring this planet, they go inside of what appears to be a derelict ship, and they find all kinds of weird stuff in there. But Kane, when he finds this alien facehugger, it's actually in this like almost sea of eggs, these giant eggs on the ground. They probably come up to about thigh or waist height on most people. And as he's looking in them, he's looking kind of down over a platform, and then he slips off and falls down and kind of wakes one up, and that's what, you know, prompts him to be attacked by it. But when he's looking down, there's this thin mist and there's a blue light there. And the fun fact is that in the studio next door to where they were shooting Alien, the band The Who was recording some videos and some things like that, and they had just gotten new laser lights for their performances. They were practicing for their concerts and filming some things, and so they actually loaned their blue laser lights to the Alien crew, so they were able to execute that cool scene. Top terror in Alien for me is the scene in the ventilation shafts. So Captain Dallas goes into the ventilation shafts looking for this little alien, right? And you have some of the crew members who are monitoring his process and kind of trying to coach him through these shafts using some kind of location device. So Lambert, she is watching this location device and she's seeing kind of a blip on there telling Dallas like, hey, you're close to this thing, you're gonna find it, you can catch it, it's cool. And then all of a sudden it disappears and they think they're having interference, and you know, there's those moments of tension, right, where you're waiting to, you know, something bad is gonna happen and you're just kind of waiting for it. And then the blip on the radar or on the tracking device starts blipping again and going very fast, and the pace of it gets quicker, and it starts moving closer and closer to Dallas. And so and of course Lambert is screaming. She's like, oh my God, get out of there. Oh my gosh. You know, she's saying what all of us are thinking is like, oh my God, dude, move your ass. And so he moves over in a shaft and then moves down. And as he goes down, the alien is in the next one. And it's such a great jump scare as he goes down, because he turns this way and looks, and as he turns back, it just lunges for him. And then you don't see anything except for fuzz on the monitor. So, the combination of the radar bleeps and Lambert's panicking and the other crew who are all just, you can see they're very disturbed, and Dallas's fear, and then the jump scare in the dark. I mean, just the combination of all of those kind of different scare tactics was just so beautifully executed. And this is an approach that they will use in Aliens, the second movie, as well, when we start to see Space Marines using their technology to track these beasts. While this isn't my top terror, I will give it an honorable mention. There is a scene where Ripley is realizing that Ash has been given these other instructions to capture this organism, and that the crew is expendable and everything else is secondary to bringing this thing back to Earth for the company. So she starts to understand kind of what's happening on the ship, and she and Ash have this big moment of tension where she's trying to leave their central like mess area, their grub area, and she's trying to go down different corridors to get away from him to try and go get Parker and Lambert, the only other two surviving members of the crew at that time. And as she tries to go down each corridor, he shuts the door on her. and he has this very just calm, he's just staring at her as she's like looking at him like, are you serious, dude? Like, let me out. And she hasn't realized yet the kind of danger that she's in, but it happens very quickly. And so for me personally, seeing a woman who's being actually cornered by a man, by these doors, and then he does lash out at her and start beating her pretty roughly and throwing her into things. And at one point he rolls up a magazine and tries to like choke her, smother her with it by shoving it into her mouth. And those moments while she's fighting for her life, and you know, Lambert and Parker are on their way, and eventually we know that they get there and that they help, but you know, it's a little triggering, it's a little tough to watch, and even when Lambert and Parker get there, even they can't pull Ash off immediately, because then we find out that he's actually an android. So he is actually not human. He is a programmed android from the company, and the way we know that, and this is something that we find out later in the series, of course, is androids drink and run on milk in this world. I don't really know why they chose that. I was thinking about it, and I guess it's because you don't think twice about watching someone drink milk. So maybe that's to help them kind of blend in, but you know, later on, the androids aren't really a secret. Everyone knows that they're artificial humans. So anyway, this part of the film is pretty disturbing, especially for anyone who maybe has been in a situation where they felt cornered and in danger by someone. Yeah, I just wanted to give that an honorable mention as far as the fear goes. So shortly after, we have the relief and enjoyment of seeing Ash get his robot block knocked off by Parker. They actually knock his head almost all the way off, and that was one of the moments that made people faint the most in the screenings and in the initial plays of the movie. There was an usher in one of the theaters who fainted because the robot's head got knocked off, and instead of all of the other blood and guts. So I guess everybody reacts differently, right? But anyway, so we'll get into the one-liner I love. I love this quote from Ash. It's actually just his head, and he's all covered in milk, as if, you know, as we would look covered in blood. And after they have knocked him out, they plug in his head just to be able to ask him questions. And he explains to them what the directive was from the company in front of Parker and Lambert, so they know what's going on. And then he says to Ripley, before she unplugs him for good, "I can't lie to you about your chances, but you have my sympathy." And then he has this coy little smile, like, okay, you know I'm an android now, you know that I don't actually feel anything. His programming would dictate that he would have to kill Ripley, because if she told Parker and Lambert about what he was trying to do on behalf of the company, that would threaten his mission. So there's something very sinister in his final moments, and then as they leave, Parker takes a flamethrower and just melts his head, and it's pretty satisfying to watch kind of the layers of plastic and latex melt off of his head and know that he's done for good. So of course the alien itself was inspired by H.R. Giger's art, which is heavily in a biomechanical influence or a style, but I really love the cinematography of this film because it did a great job of reflecting that bio and mechanical combination and transition. So in the beginning of the film, you meet the crew. They seem like kind of regular Joes and Janes. They're, you know, they're in their flight suits. They're all very casual. We see they have little rainbows on the arms of their outfits, and to me, that's just so 70s. You know, Ripley, she has this full flight suit on, that's almost like a Rosie the Riveter type of work suit, but then she has this corseting up the back of it, which serves no practical purpose, it's just for fun. So, you know, there are these little bits and pieces in the costuming that are very, very fun, and they put you at ease and make you feel like you could have met people like this. You know, the lighting on the ship during the beginning part is very warm toned. It just feels like, even though they're out in the coldest space, this is a pretty homey, cool, down to earth, no pun intended, kind of group of people. And then as the alien is introduced and the two worlds kind of start to collide, you know, the ship starts to become colder and more mechanical and more cold metal and steel, and you're seeing steam and there's venting, and you see this flickering of light, and it's all now this bluish white light, this very cool light. So there's this kind of chilling sense in the ship now as the alien kind of takes off crew members and moves its way through the ship. So the cinematography in this film is really, really phenomenal and does a great job of kind of taking your subconscious from a place of comfort to a place of discomfort. And even though there's abruptness in some of the scenes, it's this pretty fluid transition from, hey, this is a nice group of people, to, oh shit, everything has gone to hell. In much of horror, especially up until the 1970s when this film was released, most of the time we're seeing the victims being women. So we see these outside forces, these monsters that a lot of times are going after female leads and female victims in the films. So the writers wanted to flip that. They said, instead of going after the women in the audience, we want to make a film that makes men in the audience cross their legs and cringe. You know, that was why they chose the male character, Kane, who's the executive officer. They chose him to be impregnated and to be orally penetrated. Not a good enough reason to use the word penetrate. For him to be orally penetrated and to be impregnated by this thing, and they wanted to use that as a nod or I guess a view into what so many women have experienced, both on film in horror movies, but in real life. That, you know, they spoke about how women have to deal with these monsters all the time, and so they set out to make a film that didn't cause them any more terror than necessary, but really made men start to feel a little bit of what women experience. The writers of Alien, O'Bannon and Shusett, are two guys who really took gender roles in this film and flipped them on their head. Now, originally they wrote the script and just, you know, worked with male pronouns and wrote them as men, but they made a note in the script that said any of these characters could be either gender. And ultimately we ended up seeing Ellen Ripley become a female character. So she had a different name, some variation of Ellen Ripley that sounded more masculine. But then, you know, they realized that they might have something to say with her. So Ellen Ripley became a bit of a plot twist. The writers and the producers figured that most people wouldn't look at this cast of characters and think, wow, this beautiful, intelligent, and pretty straight-laced woman is going to be the one who survives this. So she was used really as a plot twist, and in the process of that has turned into one of the greatest action heroes of all time, and especially a role model to young girls who, you know, want to see those badass women in the movies and the TV shows and the different pieces of pop culture that they consume. Now, of course, because it's the late 70s, she has to have a scene where she's fighting the alien in her underwear and her nipples are showing through her shirt because whatever. But you know what? Sigourney Weaver is gorgeous, so I'm just going to enjoy her being both an action hero and a sex symbol. So ultimately, for my review, I absolutely love Alien. I think that it is a pioneering film in both the genres of sci-fi and in horror. It has huge elements of thriller in it, some great action sequences. You know, the creature development and the basis in the artwork of Giger, and how they found a way to use practical actors to make this monster come to life. Just, it was a completely new thing that hadn't been done before, and really hasn't been executed as well since, and not just because it was the first of its kind. So I absolutely love Alien. I love Sigourney Weaver. I love the cast. Everyone was so well casted, and the crew really interacted with each other in a way that made you really believe that they were congenial co-workers who all of a sudden were faced with something extraordinary. For the gore gauge on Alien, I'm going to give it a 3. I think for its time, it definitely was one of the goriest things that people had seen. Now I think, you know, we've seen so much in the decades that have followed that, you know, it doesn't really from a leaders in courts perspective fill the same amount of blood and gore as we see in some other films. But for its time, it was an amazing leap of faith for the filmmakers. They thought that at best it would become a cult classic, and now, I mean, it started a whole franchise. So I appreciate the amount of gore that's in it. It's certainly not the most I've ever seen, but it was really done well and in a way that felt meaningful to the story. On the scare scale for Alien, I give it a 4. This is definitely one of the scariest movies I've ever seen, but it's for a variety of reasons. It's not just because the alien is scary, it's not just the jump scares, it's not just the cinematography, it's a combination of all of these things, and it's also Ridley Scott being very intentional in how much of the monster he showed. You know, he talks about, you know, showing very close shots, using a lot of shadow and steam, and using these other elements to convolute the entire picture of the monster. And he does that very intentionally because the audience inside each of their own minds is going to be filling in those gaps with the things that scare them most. And so it was a really brilliant approach to the concept of showing a monster, but showing just enough of it for it to be scary, and then for the audience to take it to the next step themselves, whether consciously or unconsciously. So I think that that's just part of the brilliance around the scare tactics, the scare factor in this film. For social impact, I give Alien a 3. Definitely a pioneering film in the way of female action stars, but it wasn't really intended to be that. So because it wasn't as intentional, I didn't score it quite as high, but I do think that what Sigourney Weaver was able to do as far as establishing a female action hero persona on screen was completely out of this world and not expected. And so, you know, someone whose character was initially meant to be a plot twist, and she has turned into an icon for not just girls, for everyone, really, to look at someone who really examines a situation and makes a intelligent and thoughtful plan and next step. Even in the face of terror, she still just really keeps her head on straight and figures out, okay, this is the next right thing, this is the next right thing. You know, in the final scene of the movie, when she realizes the alien is on board the shuttle with her, you know, she even sings herself a little song just to keep herself calm, and that's the most terrified I really think we see her in the whole film. And she's still, you know, moving from into the closet, into the spacesuit, into the seat, strapping herself in, touching the buttons. Like, she's so smart, and she just does an amazing job of showing us what's possible when we keep our wits about us and use the resources and the information and the skills that we possess. So I think it's bigger than even being a female action star. I think that she has a lot to teach us about keeping your head on straight when pressure is on, even when you're scared, you know, figuring it out. For genre jumper, you know, Alien is absolutely a phenomenal sci-fi movie, so I'm going to give a 3 additional point bonus to the score for its fabulous work in the sci-fi field. Overall, with those few bonus points, that gives us a Cellar Score of 4.3 repeating, which we round up to the nearest half point. So Alien gets a 4.5 out of 5 on our scale. So, you know, Alien, again, is one of the most iconic films in horror and sci-fi of all time, and so it was nothing but a pleasure for me to watch it again, and I'm so happy to have been able to share it with you. I definitely encourage you, if you haven't seen it, to definitely put it on your list for soon. And then if you have seen it, revisit it. Think about some of the things that I've mentioned, see if you pick up on the same things, or maybe you have different thoughts, and I welcome all of that feedback and suggestions in the comment box below. And I hope that you will drop some comments for me on other films you would like to see me cover. Please do like, comment, and subscribe. And as always, what I tell my 2 boys every day of their lives, be kind, make good choices, take care of each other, and stay spooky. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.